episode number 168, being recorded on Wednesday, June 18th, 2025 at 9:04 p.m. It is a humid day. It was a little rainy, which is great. It's always great to get rain. It's always great to be indoors while it's raining outside, hearing the sounds of rain and looking outside the window and seeing all the cars getting washed, all the plants being fed. It is totally great, man. Now is the time of year to, take out your dehumidifiers, put on your fans, put on your air conditioners if you so need to, because the heat is great, but too much of it, just like too much cold, will really start to hamper on your goals, on your successes, because or what you hope to succeed at, I should say, because you're going to be so distracted by the egregiousness of the weather that you're not even going to be able to focus on what it is, the task at hand. So yeah, it's great to kind of keep comfortable, to keep cozy, to really kind of stay focused on the work at hand, whatever that might be, whatever it is that you are working on, or hoping to see through to the end. If you're, maybe you're working on writing a great novel, or maybe you're reading a great novel, or maybe you're working on directing a film, or you're watching a film, or anything of the sort, man. As long as we're being consistent and staying consistent with whatever our goals, no matter how big or strong that may be, man. Maybe, at the end of the year, you want to learn how to cook something that you've never cooked before. Well, what do you gotta do? You gotta, get the steps out, get everything that you need at hand, and then just, go ahead and do it, man. Because, you don't want to be sitting around talking about, oh man, well, I really like to be able to cook this dish, but I have no idea how to do it, and oh well, maybe one day, and then you never end up doing it. No way, Jose. Today is the day to start cooking that dish that you always wanted to cook. Whatever it is that might be, man. Whatever it is that you got to work on, you got to stay focused and you got to stay committed to it and not be tampered by outside forces who want to pull you away from your hopes and dreams. They want to really kind of pry you away. You can't have that, man. You really got to be just in the driver's seat of your own life and really got to be, headstrong about where you want to be and what you want to do, man. It's just so important, so important, because you're gonna wake up one day and realize that that time you can't get back. You can get more money, man. You can get a lot. You can get a lot of things, but time is the one thing you can't get more of. And that doesn't mean to be overly cautious. To be like scared of the end. It's more so about valuing and enjoying the time that we have here in a really kind of wonderful spectacle of a way. A couple weeks ago, I talked about the Karate Kid movies. I talked about them on the eve of the newest Karate Kid that came out a couple weeks ago. And one of the films I actually forgot to mention, which I wanted to talk about, which is kind of like the Karate Kid, but instead of karate, it's surfing. And I was going to talk about North Shore, 1987, written and directed by William Phelps, also co-written by Randall Kleiser and Tim McCanlies. And the film stars Matt Adler. Oh, I should also say that primarily the screenplay is by Tim McCanlies and William Phelps, with story credits to William Phelps and Randall Kleiser, or Kleiser. Is it Kleiser, Kleiser? I don't know, man. You guys, if you guys listen to the show long enough, you know that I'm not really good with pronouncing names and all that. But it's one of these films, man, where I forgot. So what year was the Karate Kid? That was '85, I think. 84, okay. So North Shore was only a couple years after, and when it's 87, and I think, intentional or not, it's definitely riding on that success of, it's ridiculous, man. This kid, Rick, played by Matt Adler, he's really into surfing, man. And now, okay, I haven't seen this in a little while, so if I get some of the information wrong, correct me. But anyways, he gets invited to Hawaii. This guy's like, hey man, come to Hawaii with me. You can stay with me and all that. He gets there, meets up with the guy, and the guy's like, what the hell are you talking about? Get out of here. And he's like, oh my gosh, man, I'm here. What am I gonna do? I got nowhere to go. Anyways, he ends up meeting with something of a not quite as older, but a sort of Mr. Miyagi type, played by, oh boy, who was that actor? Oh my gosh. With the character of Chandler, played by Gregory Harrison, who's a little older. He used to, he used to be a really good surfer, but he's getting older, and Rick really wants to be part of this local kind of surfing competition, man. And this guy, man, he is Gregory Harrison. He's really not. He's like, I don't like competitions about surfing. Surfing's not about competition. And anyways, but he's gonna teach him, man. He's gonna work his way from the bottom to the top. He says like, hey man, here's this old, beaten down, broken surfboard. The thing is massive, but you're gonna work your way up, almost like a kind of like a gauntlet, sort of surfboards. And meanwhile, Rick is interested in this local lady, Kiani, played by Nia Peoples. But some of the locals, man, they're talking about some of these dudes and they're like, man, you don't want to, you don't want to mess with the locals here. It's funny talking about something like The Surfer recently with Nicolas Cage, sort of being like an outsider in this sort of like territorial sort of group that's like, man, you don't want to mess with them. But it's funny in this film they talk about how like, oh man, you don't want to mess with them. These guys they're not messing around, and they're pretty actually tame. They really don't even bother the guy that much. It's really kind of like a misunderstanding, and they go away for a while. So it's kind of funny how they're not even really a threat. They're not even really in the movie all that much. And then of course the end, he's got to win them over. He's got to prove to how strong of a surfer he is, and it's a silly movie, but boy, it's one of those movies that has some sort of sentimentality to it. I only saw it a couple years ago for the first time, and actually the only time that I'd seen it. But it's one of these movies, man. I don't know what it is. It's just like something that you're just strangely attracted to. Where it's just a cozy kind of movie, man. It's a silly kind of '80s beach movie, and I say silly. I don't mean silly like like a One Crazy Summer kind of movie, like something like that, Not really so much that. It's just like, it's a Karate Kid type movie. It's going off that. It's like, oh man, it's got to do this gauntlet of like surfboards, man. But it's kind of like a nice film, man. It's one that you look online and when it came out, people are like, oh, this movie's terrible. This movie sucks. Da, da, da. And it's definitely a cult film. It's not one that people really talk about a whole lot. But I think in terms of kind of a little while ago when I was talking about coming of age films, talking about movies like Ghost World and then the Karate Kid, I think this fits perfectly into the conversation, kind of bridging the last two episodes over to this one as well, man. It's a cool film. There's a Blu-ray out by Kino Lorber. I like it. It's a nice film. And it's definitely it's definitely worth a watch. It also has got a cool poster too. It's got Nia Peoples' hair blending right into the wave. It's very seamless. But I also just like surfing films. Surfing films in general. I've never surfed before. I think it'd be cool to. Although I don't think I have the best kind of balance my feet. But you think of the great surf films. You think of like The Endless Summer. You think of like Big Wednesday. Just these really good, really kind of timeless films. Ironically, something like Big Wednesday dealing with the passage of time in a way that could be like a coming of age sort of story, but albeit a bit older. And I actually mentioned that film the last time when I was talking about these coming of age films. But I just have a certain attraction to these kinds of films. I don't really know what it is. I've never, like I said, I've never surfed in my life. It'd be cool to surf. It'd be cool to try it out. I don't think I'd be very good at it. It's also not something I'm like, really kind of passionate about going after surfing. Man, it's more so kind of like just seeing sort of people who are really good are really good and devoted about this, something like this sort of skill about having this balance to, be out there, be out in the waves and stuff. It's fun to watch, it's cool stuff, man. But yeah, North Shore, give it a watch. It makes a cool movie. And recently, actually jumping from between 1984 and 1987, I'm going to jump up from 1985, Arthur J. Bresson Jr.'s one of his few, actually, non-adult films that he directed, and ironically might be his most well-known film. That might be up for debate, but in terms of I've heard this one talked about more, but the film I'm talking about is Buddies from 1985, like I said. So written and directed by Arthur J. Bresson Jr., who was primarily an adult film director. I talked about actually a couple of his films a couple of years ago when Altered Innocence put out that really excellent double Blu-ray of Passing Strangers and Forbidden Letters. And Forbidden Letters I thought was really good. I thought it was solid, but Passing Strangers, I said it before and I say it to this day, I think is one of the most sincerely romantic adult films I've ever seen. I think it is such a loving and tender film, let alone being an adult film. It's just so great. So he makes this film Buddies in 1985, and it's got a pretty small cast. It's primarily these two actors here. We have Jeff Edom And the other actor, I feel like I should be more prepared when it comes to this sort of stuff. But believe it or not, I am not prepared. Um, as well as, how the hell am I going to say this name? David Sachter. Is that how you say it? David? Yeah, Schachter. I don't know. Anyways, we have in this film we have Jeff Adams' character plays the character Robert. He's in the hospital dying of AIDS. And we have this other character, David, played by David Schachter, or Schachter, whatever. And he's part of this buddy program. It's kind of like, they don't really go into it too much, but sort of like, people who are in the hospital and sort of like having a companion, somebody who don't really have anyone, and they are able to kind of like be friends with them and talk to them, with the time they have left. And it is interesting to kind of talk about this film in regards to the fact that both Arthur J. Bresson Jr. and Jeff Edom would pass away not that long after the release of the film. Bresson died in '87, and Edom died in '89. Edom died of AIDS, I believe, and I don't know if Bresson did as well, truthfully. Yes, he also died of AIDS in '87. So it's interesting. When I had watched the film, I hadn't been aware of that, which I think in a rewatch it would add a different kind of level of context. But it's a film that it almost feels like a play in a lot of ways. Funny, I'm talking about William Friedkin's work previously and how Killer Joe and Bug were adapted from plays by Tracy Letts. And this is, I have the Blu-ray of this, and I haven't actually watched any of the features on this, but I think context would be good provided on this, because it's basically a almost single location type of film, or very minimal location. We have primarily just this hospital room where we have these two characters conversing and their different ideologies on their backgrounds. They're both gay men, but the way they both feel about their life and their sexuality are so different. Robert is a character who wants to be very vocal about it. He really wants to, he has this thing he says early on, where he says that, like, if he was able to, he'd want to go outside the White House and hold up a sign that said, I forgot exactly what it said on it. It was like a sentence or two. I'm not going to try to paraphrase it, but basically trying to be like, very vocal about sort of at the time, sort of the government not taking the AIDS situation seriously and the people who were being infected and dying from it. Meanwhile, David himself, he's living with his boyfriend, but he doesn't feel as open about it. He doesn't feel it's as important. He feels like he is happy with his own lifestyle and doesn't need for him being gay to define him as a person. And the two of them disagree with each other and how they approach themselves. But it's interesting because it never, it rightfully never says that either one of them are right or wrong. Neither one of them are wrong. They're both, it's how they choose to live their lives and what they do with it, which is ultimately the correct way, as long as obviously, you're of course not hurting yourself or anybody else. But just the back and forth these two have, because David is also, he's writing about the situation, and he's talking about, he's giving sort of like, different articles about the at the time, the country's sort of reaction to the AIDS epidemic and the dismissal of it. And Robert himself, he goes back and forth. At one point he's not taking it very seriously. He says, okay, this is all kind of silly and ridiculous. And then at another point he's getting very worked up and very emotional about it. It's a film that it's one of the few times where I can say it's not melodramatic, but it's very passionate. And I think sometimes passion and melodrama are very easy to kind of fall into the realm of one another. There's some films that I watch. I'm not a fan of melodrama in a lot of films. I think because melodrama inherently is exaggerated, and if I'm dealing with a drama like this, I'm more interested in realistic kind of drama. And when I see a realistic drama, I don't mean dialogue that inherently feels realistic, because it can still be scripted, and because in real life people stutter, people slip up on their words, they say the wrong thing, they don't say something very poetic in the moment. But to me, when it becomes just really phony and a lot of comical yelling and big sort of scenes. Like there's a lot of like older films, like there's a lot of like Douglas Sirk films that I respect a lot, but like I just have a lot of trouble getting into some of those because they're just so melodramatic and they just don't work for me. But here, it at one point almost kind of dances with that, where it starts to kind of go that way, but it never fully does. I think ultimately this is a really touching portrait of two people who are not who have so much in common with each other, and you almost kind of you wonder if they ever would have been friends if the situation had been different. If Robert hadn't been in the hospital dying of AIDS, if he had been at a, because if he's at a protest or something like that, David's not going to be there. He's not interested in that. It doesn't, that's not how he sees his life. Because they disagree on so much. Could they have been friends outside of the situation? It's interesting to kind of speculate, but it's a very, very heartfelt film, and it's in a way where it could have easily slipped into melodrama, and it really never does. Like I said, it maybe kind of briefly goes near it, maybe one or two points, but it's a really heartfelt, really tender film, and I haven't seen all of Arthur Bresson's films. I think this is only the third one that I've seen, because I have seen Forbidden Letters, Passing Strangers, and now Buddies. He directed a film in 1983 called Abuse, which I think might be a document. No, I'm sorry, it's not a documentary. Thinking of something else now. But yeah, he did a film called Abuse, which actually also had, I think David was in that as well. At least his credits, I believe, say that he was. But that film will be watched at some point. I'm not really quite sure the accessibility of it at the time of this recording. But it's just the way that I've seen him direct these films. I don't know what it is, but he is able to kind of paint such a heartfelt and really emotional sort of portrait of these young gay men, whether it be something sexual or not, like in his adult films, or it be something like this, where you just have this great kind of back and forth where it all feels so honest and feels so heartfelt. Somebody who is living at this time and is dealing with the AIDS crisis and all that, and you talk about it, people pictures and stuff, sort of like you only go up to a certain point of the golden age of porn before you start to get AIDS coming into it, and a lot of productions getting a lot of filmmakers and actors not wanting to kind of take that risk, man. So it's sort of like somebody who's in the throes of it. I've talked before on the show about another one of my favorite adult filmmakers, which is Fred Halstead, and the films he was making at the time, including L.A. Plays Itself and Sex Tool and Sex Garage. And I gotta read that book, man. Halstead Plays Himself. I really want to read that book. I don't know why I haven't picked it up yet. It's actually funny, I got a stack of books out there, and I just ordered another one. I was like, oh, I want to read that next. So it's just like, man, it never ends. But it's also great, I like having stacks of books and stacks of films that I haven't been able to go through yet, because it always adds that layer of exploration, of just like, if you're listening to this now, oh, excuse me, oh, something in my throat. I apologize, but you listen to this now and you think to yourself about the films, about the books, about the songs, the bands, the albums, the paintings that a year ago you were just discovering, or 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, and how it's affected your life. I can think back to like when I first started this show, and the films that I've watched since then, which have so greatly affected me and have kind of continually molded me and my personality, and how you see certain events, and how, and that's what his work does, man. It's great to kind of have that. Well, I mean, I'm talking about having that the stacks of media to consume, man. It's great, and like with Arthur, Bresson and Fred Halstead, filmmakers whom I wasn't aware of years ago, and now having seen their work, and just the continued sort of staying points they've had with me, of just the films I still think about, and how they're directed, or how they're written, or how they're acted, and sort of the consistency and the longevity that they have long after the credits roll. And Buddies is no different than any of that. I think it's a film that it will be revisited, and I would actually like to check out those features as well. 'cause I think that Blu-ray that Vinegar Syndrome put out is actually, it's got a decent amount in there. I actually, funnily enough, a couple years ago, I think it was Arthur Bresson's sister, and even David Sachter, who actually did a screening of it not too far. And I wish I had been aware of it at that. I mean, I think I was aware of it at that time, but I for whatever reason, didn't end up going to it. Even now, I'm not sure why I didn't. But either way, I think with that release that came out, gosh, a couple of years ago. I don't know when this came out, but I remember it being sort of maybe 2015, I don't know, maybe 2016. Um, Probably around that time. I'm really not sure, but getting a bit more attention that way. And then now it can reach a wider audience because it says it was restored in 2020. So actually, okay, it couldn't have been 2015, 2016. I don't know. Either way, but I think it's a film that, because it's coming from that time, and because you have somebody who is able to film these actors in such a compelling and great way. It's a film that doesn't feel dated. It feels so remarkable in that this could be made now. I mean, obviously, the sort of the response to AIDS and the sort of where people are then to people are now. Things have evolved and devolved. That's your prerogative. But I think that ultimately the core of this film is so timeless. Of just, even if you could take the age part of it away, the fact that somebody is dying so young, and this one last sort of holding on point, this sort of friendship with somebody else that is so compelling. It's just a really great film. It's one of my favorite things that I've watched this year, and it's a brisk pace too, man. I mean, it's 80 minutes tops, with credits. So, I mean, by the time it was over, I was just sitting there like, oh man, I have been sitting here for 80 minutes or so. It's a solid film, and I would assume that the Blu-ray is still in print, but either way, it's an easy film to find. If you go on YouTube, it's still up on there. So the accessibility of it is completely there. But I recommend, man, wholeheartedly, if you're really into these smaller scale, almost play-like dramas, with just good kind of dialogue, good characters. Really, that's the really kind of the big thing about it, is that the relationship between these two characters is compelling enough to make the whole thing worthwhile. And it's a solid film, man. I really can't say that enough. It's really good stuff. And it'll make me, it makes me want to track down or take a look at the rest of some of his work that I hadn't seen before, including Abuse from 1983, which will be watched at some point. Again, it's all about finding the accessibility of it, or I should say, all about finding the film itself, whether or not it's accessible or not, able to see, remains to be seen. But we will take it from there. And actually, funnily enough, one of the films recently I had watched, which I guess could have also been brought up in the conversation. Actually, I say could have been brought up in the conversation of the coming of age type of films I've been talking about lately, is a film directed by Paul Newman, 1984's Harry and Son. Really, really cool film, man. Paul Newman plays the father in this, plays the character Harry, and his son, played by somebody who's come up on the show before, Robbie Benson, who I was talking about before with Breaking Away. I don't actually know if I had even mentioned him when it came to Breaking Away, but he's great in that film. No, actually, I'm sorry. I'm getting him mixed up with Dennis Christopher. My bad. I'm thinking of him in that film wanting to race with the Italians. So, my bad. I'm getting my films mixed up here. Anyways, Roy Benson is great, though. Roy Benson is a great actor. Actually, I was talking about Jeremy a little while ago. He was the title character in that. But yeah, Harry's Son is one that's, interestingly enough, not really been talked about. It's got a early role from Morgan Freeman in this. It's got Ossie Davis in a small role in this. Wilford Brimley. And it's a good film, man. It's one where it's about a complicated relationship between this father and son, Paul Newman and Robbie Benson. And Harry is one of these guys played by Paul Newman who he really is just a different person than his son, in a way where it really kind of affects their relationship. Where Robert Benson wants to be a writer, he really doesn't want to work like a traditional kind of job, and you can understand the frustrations from Paul Newman, but ultimately he comes back to that it's like he never really gets a sense that he's trying to guide him or to be a real kind of father figure to him. He just kind of was always talking down to him and just scrutinizing him, instead of being, someone to kind of really kind of show him the way. Robbie Benson as well, he's not taking anything seriously. Well, it's also like Paul Newman, he can't work. He got in an accident. And so he's frustrated. He wants to work, but he can't. And Robert Benson can work, but doesn't want to. And that different sort of clashing of generations. But it's one that I thought it was like solid film that is definitely in the conversation of these type of films, of a character, Robert Benson, who's really trying to discover himself, really kind of discover what he wants to do and how he wants to kind of forge his life, and him not wanting to kind of follow in the footsteps of his father. And where it kind of ends up, it's not exactly like a completely clean like resolution. There is still that kind of ache there, but that kind of feeling of just being ultimately you have to be your own person. You really can't try to duplicate what somebody else is doing, or what they want you to do. You kind of have to go your own way. It's in a way that at least in terms of Paul Newman's films, it's one that I don't really hear brought up a whole lot, let alone for, I'm not even talking about solely like his acted films. I'm talking about his directed films as well, because he only directed a handful of films, and I don't want to say only, like, oh, only did that, but he did, he did Rachel from 1968, which is a really terrific film. There's a Warner Archive Blu-ray of that out. Then in 1971, he did Sometimes a Great Notion. Sometimes a Great Notion. 72, we did The Effect of Gamma Rays on Man in the Moon Marigolds. In 84, he does Harry and Son, and then in 87, he does The Glass Menagerie. And he also did a TV movie in 80 called The Shadow Box, as well as a short in 62. And there was that book that I read that was actually pretty good, that came out a couple years ago. And it was sort of, it wasn't really a biography of Paul Newman. It was more about kind of reflections at different points in his life, and sort of the sort of troubled, I don't even want to say life, because that's not even the right word, but sort of, Paul Newman a bit more honest and a bit more open about some of the struggles that he was having, and some of the not so clear cut sort of answers that he was coming to with his life. It's a very, it is a memoir, but it's as self-reflective as it is almost kind of self-critical in a way. But I mean, this is just kind of one perspective on the book. This was 2022 and was written by Paul Newman, but ultimately there is just a lot more, I think, that can be pulled away from this. But it's a solid book. I would recommend that. But anyways, time is running out, so I'm going to say goodbye on this one. So hey, thank you guys for listening. I really appreciate that. Take care. Keep focused on your work, on your goals, and on your dreams. And yeah, man, just you got to keep on going. Times are gonna get tough, and days are gonna get long, and you're gonna have self-doubt. But that's a-okay. Everyone has self-doubt. Everyone gets self-reflective about a lot of things. We can't give up, though. We got to keep on going, because hey, man, we made it this far, so we might as well not stop here. So hey, that's all I got. Take care, guys.